Ontario is home to the largest Indigenous population in Canada, including diverse constituencies from the far north of the province to the heart of the capital city. Here to help us understand what issues have been top of mind in some of those communities this election cycle, Isadore Day. He is Ontario Regional Chief of the Chiefs of Ontario, and Margaret Froh, President of the Métis Nation of Ontario. And it's good to have both of you here at our studio tonight at TVO. Let's share some numbers that you two know very well with our viewers, and they can be up to speed on where things are at in the province today. Ontario has, as we suggested, the largest Indigenous population of any province in Canada, nearly 400,000. The First Nations population in Ontario constitutes the majority of that at almost 250,000, almost a quarter living on reserve. There are more than 120,000 self-identified Métis people in Ontario. Average age of the Indigenous population is almost 34 years compared to almost 41 years for the non-Indigenous population. Let's talk more about the Indigenous gap here. Median income for Indigenous people in Ontario, that's age 25 to 64, a little over $33,000 annually. But for non-Indigenous people, it is over $42,000 annually. High school completion rates for Indigenous people, 76%. For First Nations living on reserve, 45%. For the non-Indigenous population, 93%. And finally, life expectancy for Indigenous people, 71 years. Compare that to non-Indigenous people who have a life expectancy that is 10 years longer. Those, Chief Day, are the facts as we embark on Election Day, which we're not too far away from right now. So I want to get a better understanding of what you have wanted to hear from the various political leaders during the course of this election campaign.
Well, we just heard a debate last night, the last debate of this election campaign from the Liberals, the NDP, and the PC. And there was no mention of Indigenous issues, let alone First Nations. You know, the most striking stat that you just mentioned here, Steve, was the fact that the income levels in First Nations are lower. So we experience grinding poverty in all of our communities on a mean average. Now, when you look at the disparities in the north, given that the cost of living is higher in the north, with those low incomes, you can then assume that the poverty will be grinding and that the impacts of that poverty obviously produce other social ills and very challenging circumstances for our people. So again, we didn't hear anything from those parties during this campaign, and it's unfortunate. I do want to follow up on that in as much as we probably have to cut the leaders some slack regarding last night. They didn't get asked about Indigenous issues. That's, I guess, the fault of the people who put the questions together. But how about in the rest of the campaign? Take the debate out of it. In the rest of the campaign, have you heard them putting forward ideas that you think are designed to appeal to a First Nations audience? I think there are some issues, but again, you know, let's face it, reconciliation from the context of a policy standpoint, we've pretty much run the rigor. Like, how much more can you do within the context of policy? We need to see reconciliation in action. And what I mean by that is it's no longer just going to be about the touchy feel-good about the relationship. It's got to move beyond to the harder issues. We need to see racism eradicated. We need to see poverty, you know, out the door. But the big issue at hand here is going to be about the land and the resources in the province of Ontario. That's the big one, and it seems to be that the party leaders have not touched that in any way, shape, or form during this election.
We will follow up on that in this conversation. President Froh, how about you? What have you heard? What are you looking for? Let's start there from the political leaders so far.
Well, we're looking for a recognition of the Métis people in Ontario.
You don't feel you have that already?
We do, actually. We've come a long way in terms of that recognition of the Métis Nation, but we still have a ways to go. And in particular, when I look at the party platforms, there aren't any Métis-specific commitments that have been made, though obviously there's lots of areas where the things that are being promised will impact, obviously, our citizens. What we are looking for, whoever forms government, is a government that will live up to the commitments, the agreements that have been signed, the commitments that have been made, that will continue on this path of reconciliation and not to slow us down. We've made some huge advances. over the last several years, and we don't want to lose track of those things. We don't want to lose speed.
So you haven't seen anything in the platform particularly, although, you know, there are some things there. I've seen the NDP, for example, say that they want to share mining revenue with Indigenous people. It's not Métis specific, but it's under a broader umbrella. Does that help you at all?
Yes, no, absolutely, it does. There's lots of, I mean, the things that are really important to our citizens, things like the environment, things like access to education, things like healthcare, and accessing the services and culturally appropriate services, and especially for our citizens that are in the north. These are all really big concerns. And so the promises that are being made through the platforms, I think, do give some comfort. Though we're already well down a path to start to advance on some of those things, and that's what I'm speaking about. In December of 2017, the MNO signed a tripartite framework agreement with
MNO
Canada, the Métis Nation of Ontario,
okay,
with Canada and Ontario to advance reconciliation, to begin negotiating on rights, including the right of self-government, but also to start talking about concrete things that we can be doing to address some of these underlying issues that Chief Day was just mentioning, the impact of poverty in our communities. As one example, on all of those social determinants, Métis people fall short, and we are at a higher risk of disease. We struggle in terms of that income level, skills and training, the education piece, all of those things. So under our framework agreement that we've signed, that is really where we're investing our energy. And so whoever forms government, we want to look to them to continue with that work.
Okay, before we get there, before we look forward, let's look back. I know Premier Kathleen Wynne thinks that she's got a great story to tell as it relates, Chief Day, to reconciliation with First Nations people in this province. She renamed the ministry from what it used to be to what it is right now. It's about Indigenous relations and reconciliation. She certainly believes that she certainly believes her heart is in the right place as it relates to an ongoing conversation with First Nations peoples in this province. That's her view. What's your view?
Well, I think we need to look at this issue of reconciliation very carefully. First and foremost, let us not forget that reconciliation doesn't come from a government, a political will, or it doesn't come from, you know, some political masterminds that designed this process that we've seen unfold in this country over the last several years. It was the Indian residential school survivors that said, as part of our settlement agreement, we want to set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was them that developed the 94 calls to action. But what you've seen government do in this country is they've actually taken reconciliation and they've made it into policy issues and frameworks and processes that now it's being named a ministry. The danger in that, Steve, is that once political will is expended, what do you do with the reconciliation movement or process? You know, we need to ensure that, you know, first and foremost, it sits with our people, the survivors, and that we continue to move that agenda based on where they want reconciliation to go. The other thing I just want to touch base on is that, you know, I know this is not a debate, but you just asked a very critical question in my view. It's with regard to the resource revenue sharing commitments that have been made by the Liberal government, and that you said it was Indigenous, you know, from a broad perspective. You know, with all due respect to my friend here, Margaret Froh, the president of MNO, there is an impasse there, and this is why you haven't seen much movement on the Métis side with regard to the commitments coming out of government on resource revenue sharing, because it's about the land. We've got some serious issues now because we haven't seen the real work begin with regard to reconciliation, reciprocity, and recognition of First Nation rights and title with respect to the treaties. It's a big issue, and in Ontario, our relationship with the Métis Nation of Ontario has been challenged. There's stress there, and there's pressure. And I think it's only responsible that governments begin to put this on the table so we can sort things out.
I need to give you a chance to respond to that.
Absolutely, and I think when we talk about that recognition and reciprocity and this process of reconciliation, I think it absolutely is something that is all about having a greater understanding, being able to understand the foundation, and ultimately I completely agree with Chief Day in terms of that the movement that came from the residential school resolution or settlement that was done. But long before that, the Supreme Court of Canada was talking about reconciliation in the context of Section 35 and rights under Section 35, which, as we all know, are recognized with First Nations people, with Inuit people, and with Métis people. Those rights don't overlap. There is no hierarchy in rights.
Well, it sounds like there is.
There isn't. There is nothing in Canadian law that suggests that there is a hierarchy in rights. That said, it's really critically important that we recognize the history in this country and that we recognize use of land, that we recognize traditional territories.
Okay. Well, I don't want to exacerbate whatever issues there may be between your two situations here. However, he's talking about original treaties signed with the Crown hundreds of years ago.
Right.
You're talking about the Constitution of the country, which is 35 years old. I appreciate you say there's no hierarchy of rights, but on the other hand, I'm hearing something different from Chief Day.
Well,
Fair to say?
And we could have, this could be an entire other program that
Yes,
you may want to schedule for us to come in and spend some time on. But when we talk about treaty as an example, Métis were excluded from treaties. So at the time when treaty commissioners came out onto the land and started to negotiate treaties with First Nations, both First Nations and Métis leaders were saying, you also need to deal with the Métis. And consistently, time after time after time, those treaty commissioners said, we don't have a mandate to deal with the Métis, we only have a mandate to deal with First Nations.
You're
and
quite
so they
right.
entered into treaty. With one exception, Steve, which was a treaty that was signed here in Ontario. It's the only example of Métis signing treaty as Métis, and that was the half-breed adhesion to Treaty 3.
I was bad there because that's a whole other program
It
that
is
we
a
need
whole
to
other
spend time on.
program.
And I do want to
It's a
get more
major debate.
focus.
It
It's a big issue.
But I do want to get us focused on the provincial campaign that we're
Yes.
into right now. And I want to know, have you met with any of the three-party leaders?
Not
Let me
recently.
rephrase that.
Yeah.
The four major party leaders. Have you met with either Liberal, Tory, New Democrat, or Green Party leaders?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you asked that question. I put it out there a number of times to meet with the three-party leaders to talk about these very issues, the harder issues. You know, the leader of the Green Party, he came to meet with our chiefs, you know, spent time with our chiefs and talked about his platform. We've not gotten the same consideration from the three-party leaders. It would have been good if there would have been an opportunity to do so, but that just didn't happen. We seem to have been sidestepped here.
What do you think about that?
Well, I think they're avoiding the real hard issues, right? We've got real hard issues to deal with, and you know, I have to say that it takes real leadership to you know, step up to the plate and face the real issues. And in this case, you know, Kathleen Wynne had a grand opportunity to say, you know, I'm out at this community, Henvey Inlet, who are now putting up windmills under the Green Energy and Economy Act, and this is a liberal policy platform that goes way back, and we. You know, we didn't see that, though, and it's unfortunate. It's a lost opportunity, and it just shows just how far we are in terms of the political spectrum and priorities.
I take it you didn't get any meetings either?
No, we haven't had any during the campaign. My last meeting, we have been. We've actually been reaching out, in particular, when we've got a very strong relationship with Premier Wynne and this particular government. I met with her just a couple of months ago on a whole range of issues. We've certainly had meetings with the NDP and with Andrea Horwath. The one leader that I haven't connected with in any way is Doug Ford, and we have been trying to arrange for some opportunity there, but
what's the explanation given for the meeting not having happened yet?
I think it's been an issue of, from my understanding, of coordinating. There's a lot of movement, and we haven't nailed down.
Do you think he's trying to duck you, or he hasn't had time?
I'm not so sure that that's the case. I've certainly heard some of our citizens who have spoken with him as he's traveled around the province and been in their communities. But there is, I think it would be great, you know, certainly moving forward, if we were in a position where there was that recognition and there was, as a matter of course, the parties reaching out to the Métis Nation and to First
I think
Nations.
it's indicative of the condition of the relationship with Ontario and the Indigenous people. Obviously, if they seen a need or an interest or a value in, they would have. We are in a very ambiguous time right now. I don't consider myself Canadian, I don't consider myself Ontarian, nor do I consider our First Nation people Ontarians or Canadians, but we certainly share the land. And if these party leaders would have thought about, you know, what's going to be some of the critical policy issues going into, you know, this next tenure of government, First Nations aren't going away. As a matter of fact, we're going to turn up the volume on some pretty critical issues.
Do you intend at any point over the next week and a half until it's election night, do you intend to endorse anybody?
Absolutely not.
Do you intend to indicate which of the four major parties you think are more likely to negotiate future issues better with you as opposed to worse?
I probably won't either, Stephen. I'll tell you, I'll clarify this. I support our people going to the ballot box and helping to affect change in the province.
You do, because not every Indigenous leader does.
I do support our people going to the box.
Okay.
And I have come to the point where I even recognize and see the value in our people being part of the legislature. But I will not, as a First Nation leader, vote. The reason why I won't vote is because as a sovereign, as a title and rights holder, we as First Nation leaders need to guard sovereignty, and we need to ensure that we're not beholden to any political party.
I get that, but Chief Day, if you want non-Indigenous Ontarians to care about the outcome of this election as it relates to, let's say, you know, people are out there and they're thinking, you know what, I really want to do right by Indigenous people, and I want to vote for the party that I think will do best for them.
Yep.
Are you going to give them any guidance?
I obviously will look at where there's value, but I also want to ensure that as a prerequisite that the integrity of the relationship is the foundation by which we have that dialogue.
I'm not sure what that means.
Well, what that means is I need people to know that I don't vote for any political party. And I can't be beholden to. We have to maintain neutrality in that relationship.
Okay.
And that basically...
So you're worried if you favor one,
you know,
the neutrality's out the window.
Absolutely.
Okay. How about you, Madam President?
So from my perspective, Métis, I believe, at least certainly what I've been taught, have always played a very active role in terms of civics.
So you're going to vote?
Absolutely.
Who are you going to vote for?
I'm not going to tell you who I'm going to vote for, Steve. But
Will you endorse?
But I think what really is important is that we encourage our citizens to get out there and vote. This, I think, is an absolutely critical time. There's a lot on the table for us right now, and whoever forms government is going to play a big role in terms of how far we can advance. What we have done is we've asked a series of questions of the three major political parties, and invited their responses. And those are responses that we will be sharing with all of our citizens. We'll be putting them on the website. So for those Ontarians that want to take a look to see what are the parties planning to do, how can we support parties that will support reconciliation, all of that information will be there and will be accessible. And those questions really do speak specifically to what commitments will you make to working with the Métis Nation of Ontario.
I appreciate that, but you know that people often look for cues from other organizations. They want to know what the Chamber of Commerce thinks. They want to know what, you know, whatever the Social Planning Council thinks. And they, you know, a lot of those organizations, if not give outright endorsements, they certainly indicate, you know, who they think would be best for the province going forward. Which one of those four major parties do you think would be best for the Métis Nation going forward?
Well, we can't take a position, a formal position in terms of endorsing any particular party when there's a huge diversity within we have over 20,000 adult citizens, but we know based on statistics that we're probably much more in the range of 90 to 100,000 Métis across Ontario. What I can say is whoever is going to form government are going to have large shoes to fill in terms of the advances that have been made with regard to the Métis and advancing reconciliation.
Under the current government?
Under the current government.
Under the current government. Okay, that's good to know. Chief Day, let me read this to you. This is regarding the June 7th election. A man by the name of Lawrence Bluecoat from Fort Severn, which is the most northerly community in the province of Ontario, said, "It really doesn't matter who's in there. We get screwed anyway." What's your response to the view that it doesn't matter who becomes the next Premier of Ontario and forms the next government, it's not going to be good for Indigenous people regardless?
That's a well-founded frustration. We have to acknowledge that there is going to be skepticism, that there will be fear and anxiety about the next government. Our people are watching and paying close attention to the election outcomes, and we certainly want to work with who's ever prepared to do what's right by our people. So I have to say that this particular statement and that fear and that skepticism, it's real. And we have to recognize that that's probably one of the guideposts as to how and where we need to make change.
There almost certainly will be an Indigenous representative in the next Parliament of Ontario. They created, of course, 2 new northern ridings,
Yes.
and one of the ridings, Kiiwetinoong, is majority population Indigenous. How significant would it be, in your view, to have an Indigenous MPP at Queen's Park?
Well, do you remember Elijah Harper? You know,
Sure.
as certainly as an MLA, he had a huge impact.
From Manitoba.
And I can safely assume that once you see an MPP here in Ontario, you will see the same spirit, the same political vigor, the same wisdom that comes from the people. It's going to be a very different tone when one of our people get up and speak in the legislature here in Ontario.
I think you're right about that. How about, I mean, the retiring Speaker of the Legislature, Dave Levac from Brant County, who has Métis, is descendant of Métis, I believe. So if there were a Métis elected, it wouldn't be the first. But how important do you think it would be to have an Indigenous voice in that chamber?
I think it's incredibly important, and I think where we have our voices represented, it does a number of things. One is it actually brings the Métis voice to, or First Nation voice to, all of the conversations that are happening within government. But also the other thing it does is it shows our people that we are reflected within those institutions, and I think that's where that despair that the quote that you referenced comes from, is this sense of we don't see ourselves reflected in government, we don't see ourselves reflected in the priorities that are established. That, in particular, I think for our young people, breeds this sense of otherness, or we're left out in some way. So I think having that voice is critically important.
I wouldn't ask Chief Day this because he's already said he doesn't vote, and therefore it's a different issue for him. But you've said you do vote.
I do.
Why don't you run?
Because I'm president of the Métis Nation of Ontario.
I get it. I mean, why don't you run for a seat in provincial parliament as the president of the Métis Nation of Ontario?
Well, perhaps that's something that in the future will be happening.
I mean, you obviously like politics. You had to run for the job you've got.
There you go, and I'm on the agenda with Steve Bacon. Yeah, no, you know, I truly believe in getting out there and participating. I've been serving on boards and doing that kind of thing for a very long time. But that's something that I was raised with, this notion of you need to get out, you need to volunteer, you need to do your time, you need to support community, and we're doing that. We're really encouraging, in particular, our young people to get active and engaged. In our last provincial election for the Métis Nation of Ontario, we saw much greater youth participation, and in fact, youth made up over half of my campaign team. And what I can tell you is that moving forward, we are active. We're active participants within community. We are the fastest growing, Indigenous people generally are the fastest growing demographic in this country.
I'm going to look for your name on a ballot in 2022.
And our young people are coming up, and they are pushing, and they are holding all leaders accountable, which I think is amazing.
I'm afraid that's our time, but I want to thank both of you for coming in tonight and sharing your views. Isadore Day, the Ontario Regional Chief of the Chiefs of Ontario. Margaret Froh, President, Métis Nation of Ontario.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.